Remember Food Fight? The year 2013 sure fucking does. Released in 2012, Food Fight enjoyed a year or so of infamous notoriety on the internet. Everyone rushing in to scream about how, oh, the worst movie ever, nightmare fuel. But on crack. It was, until everyone forgot about it and moved on to better, more important things. Until now. There's really no introduction needed for this one. No sense in explaining it either. If you've been on the fucking internet for longer than 12 minutes, chances are you know what Food Fight is. Practically everyone and their fucking mammy has made some shitty review of it, describing how it's the worst movie ever made. And it is, without saying, a very bad movie from a conventional point of view. If you really don't know what Food Fight is, or maybe you just barely need a reminder, basically it's just a crappy schlock film that's basically Wreck-It Ralph, but with grocery items. So, that's that mystery solved. Wreck-It Ralph ripoff. Alright people, wrap it up, let's get the fuck out of here. But wait, is that really where this rabbit hole ends? You may think it's safe enough to say it was obviously produced to ride the coattails of Wreck-It Ralph, in the same vein as any bargain bin knockoff, but Food Fight has one distinct difference about it that sets it apart from your typical shitty ripoff movie. What is that difference, you may ask? It was produced on a $45 or $60 million budget, and lots of people really tend to just write this one off. $500 million. Big deal, right? The movie is still awful. Well, you really need to put $45 or $60 million into perspective here. 45 or 60 million is literally 45 or 60% of 100 million, and 100 million is the budgets of movies like each of the 3 films of the recent Hobbit trilogy, or each of the Lord of the Rings before it, and basically any large blockbuster movie. Money doesn't translate directly into quality, this is very true, but just take a look at some of this movie's animation. This is horrible, and not only is it horrible, but they obviously cut a lot of corners with it. Let's forget about Food Fight for just a second and talk about bad movies in general. What are bad movies? Well, that's an easy one. They're movies that suck. Well, good and bad are ultimately subjective things. It can be generally accepted, I think, that some movies meet a standardized bar of quality, and others do not. Of these movies that fall short of our cultural preferences and expectations, there are 2 types. You have your bad movies that were meant to be good, but just didn't make it, and then you have your movies that were purposely made to be bad, or at least very low quality, and intentionally lazy. Produced quick and on the cheap, their intentions are very obvious. To attempt fooling little old grannies and the like into accidentally purchasing a movie they believe is a superior product that this movie is attempting to emulate. At first glance, it seems Food Fight is no different. Obviously a ripoff of Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. How is this shit movie any different from any of those shit movies? There's no fucking mystery here, some asshole. Fuck off. But hold, my brothers. I still insist there is, and I want to bring up the movie's budget once again. $45 to $60 million, supposedly, went into this project somewhere, and while it has a small cast of B-list celebrities and people of note, including Charlie Sheen, who you do have to remember was at one time the highest paid actor in Hollywood, and who could forget Christopher's Lloyd and Walken being attached to this mess. Also, that guy who voiced the boss from Dilbert.
I suppose we could build a cliff in the meadow. Get the best of both worlds.
It's the Dilbert guy. And animation, even shitty animation, is not cheap to produce. But Food Fight just cost way too much for me to write it off as another tricked-ya knockoff. $45 or $60 million is not the kind of fucking investment risk you take on a product you're just trying to pan off as a cheapy knockoff. As an added bit of trivia, the bulk of these shitty knockoff films comes from a single source, that is, Video Brinquedo, or Video Toyland from the heartland of South America, Brazil. They're the ones behind your What's Ups and your Tiny Cars and all the fucking sequels of it they made, and your Rat-a-Tat-Toing and your Little Panda Fighters and your Kiara the Braves and your fucking rip-off of fucking B-movie. And now here comes Food Fight, hulking in at $45 or $60 million, the budget of an actual fucking film production, and it's barely a small step above anything you'd see from one of these far, far cheaper productions. So where the fuck did that money go? My answer? Well, let's take a small look at the history of Food Fight's birth. It all began when a man named Larry Kasanoff and some other dickhead from the studio Threshold Entertainment came up with the movie's concept way back in 1999. So already we can rule out FoodFight being an intentional ripoff of Wreck-It Ralph, despite Wreck-It Ralph also originally being concepted sometime back in the late 80s. Also, according to statements made by Kasanoff, the production did not pay nor was paid for the product tie-ins. All of the money attained for its funding was literally the work of Kasanoff himself. Where all the funding came from is a mystery to this day, but at least $20 million of it came via the financing company StoryArc, which is basically a company where people looking to invest money go, and then the middleman company, in this case StoryArc, hooks them up with investment opportunities. Unfortunately enough for the investors, in this case it was FoodFight. Prior to obtaining this chunk of funding, Kasanoff had made signed deals with Lionsgate Entertainment in order to distribute the film, so it was a very serious undertaking, at least from the start. What we know is that Kasanoff got even more money, eventually somewhere between the 45 or 65 million, again depending on which source you go by, and then the production went increasing amounts of sour thereafter. As any other video or Wikipedia article on the net will tell you, the production began to miss deadlines, pissing Lionsgate off, and the production almost completely stagnated until the original investors invoked a clause in the contract of their investment insurance that basically ended with the movie getting auctioned off for a measly $2.5 million to some who knows who cares production company. That basically just finished up the movie as quick and as cheap as possible. Snippets of internal production are hard to come by, but from what I could piece together, the production did have a pretty legitimate effort behind it, at least as far as its early days. Photos found show incredibly good-looking concept art pieces and unconfirmed testimonials from people who claim to have been working under commission contract for the Threshold Entertainment Company tell that production, while very shaky from the very start, was at least forging ahead and that some people with actual talent were involved in the project. Again, just from what can be pieced together, it seems Kasanoff was more or less either an aspiring bold go-getter or an arrogant dickhead, again, depending on who you ask, and that his direction of the project was not very good. Kasanoff insisted to direct the film himself, having raised the budget mostly on his own, despite not having any experience in directing animation before. Now, again, it depends on who you ask as to whether or not this was wholly a bad thing, but whatever the case, he reportedly bombed pretty fucking bad. People claim his production notes were as simplistic and unhelpful as him literally just leaving them a note saying, "Make a scene XX% more awesome." Was it just Kasanoff trying to be relaxed and cool, or was he just a stupid dickhead? I don't know. What's important is that, after a good little roasting and development hell, a contract clause saved FoodFight and got it finished and released to a $78,000 box office. Oh baby, hitting the money on that one. That is almost a small percentage of the original investment. So, lay to rest your claims of FoodFight being the product of ripping off Wreck-It Ralph, or that it scammed companies into giving the production funding to get their mascots in it, or anything like that, because it wasn't. It was just a shitty movie with bad direction and wasted talent. If anything, by Kasanoff's own words, the movie was modeled more after Toy Story than anything else. But that still doesn't explain where the fuck the money went. At least $45 million was put into this, and even if we make absurd and generous assumptions that the voice actors were paid the majority percentage of it or something, or assume they invested more money than necessary into the movie's wonderful visual assets, the numbers I pull out of my ass still don't add up. So, what does this little ducky think happened? Well, maybe you've heard of a little stage play, or perhaps more likely one of the two movie adaptations of it called The Producers. Yeah, remember that one? The two guys, a scam artist and an accountant, who team up to make a play so bad by fooling investors into thinking their production is a good bet because they have famous names attached to it that no one will notice when they slip off with a small, but still sizable, chunk of the money? I think that's exactly what fucking happened here. Maybe this wasn't Kasanoff's initial intentions, but perhaps when he ended up getting way more money than he found he knew what to do with, and as he realized he really didn't know what the fuck he was doing, he laundered as much as he could and then allowed the product as it had been thus far to be chumped off to another studio for completion. fuck, maybe I'm totally wrong, and in fact, I probably am. It's probably just the product of an arrogant director who thought it would be easy to make a movie, and a cautionary tale for investors who think a movie with big names attached to it will be a surefire investment. But I don't know, people. I mean, I'm just not fucking seeing where the money went. There's no records or report that I can find of any of the initial budget being left over. Likewise, however, no reports that Kasanoff or someone else might have stolen off with it. There's also, of course, the whole stolen version of the movie, where the first version of the movie was allegedly stolen and production had to begin over from scratch. This is often cited as a bit of food fight trivia, but looking into it, I can find almost no information out about it. Sure, there's the original trailer that expressed slightly more fluid and cartoony animations, but I could never find any confirmation that as much as 60%, as some sources claim, of the original movie ever existed. In fact, what I did find were basically people claiming the whole story was a bit fishy, and that early CG work done for the film prior to the supposed theft more or less matched what ended up in the final product, outside of its promotional trailer, which had special care taken for it, as it was to be used primarily to market the movie to more investors. Then there's even claims circulating that this supposed original cut looked so good that investors were calling Threshold Studio the next Pixar. I think what we can come away from all of this with is that Food Fight wasn't an attempt to rip off Wreck-It Ralph or just a scam to get money from company tie-ins with product placement or anything like that. Whatever the hell it was purely its own entity. Whether just a shit movie or producers-esque scam, I think we can all agree that it was an abject failure. Or was it? It most likely was, but if Kasanoff's intentions were to launder his budget money, was it a failure? Even then, think about it. When the fuck was the last time before watching a bunch of cunts on YouTube bitch about this movie that you saw or heard from the likes of Mrs. Buttersworth or that pickle stork or that retard tuna guy? If Kasanoff's words were true and the companies associated with these mascots paid no money for their part in the movie, they essentially received completely free viral marketing, valued in at who knows how much money. Millions of fat, sedimentary assholes have watched the likes of JonTron or Nostalgia Guy or, I don't know, that I Hate Everything cunt, rip on this movie, throwing images and scenes of each company's mascot around to millions of viewers. Even right now, you're watching my dumbass sit here and basically advertise these characters to you. I bet your ass wants a fucking pickle now, don't it? So, for whatever Food Fight was or may have been, I think what is best to learn from this whole debacle is that it's good to be confident, but deadly to be arrogant, and that something that ends up looking fucking worthless and awful may have in fact had real talent behind it at some point. If nothing else, it's certainly an interesting tale at how distorted and fucked up a project as large as a feature film can end up being when not properly controlled. Oh, and as for Kasanoff, yeah, now he's fucking making a film adaptation of Tetris. Whew. Never let the dream die,